And then we spoke a lot about Gyökeres last week. How do you think we handled him last night?
Really well.
Yeah.
I thought Saliba and Gabriel, I think they relish battles like this. It's the same when they come up against Haaland, when there's a striker who's been very talked about, and maybe a striker who's a little bit more physical in their approach. I think they enjoy that tussle. They enjoy standing up to that. And I think they did a great job. I mean, Gyökeres has terrorised defences in Portugal, obviously, and in Europe too. We saw what he did to Man City. I think they handled him expertly. And it was interesting, actually, that once Gabriel went off, you saw him maybe get a little bit more joy, which I think tells you, again, like that physical dominance that Saliba and Gabriel both have just is so important to this Arsenal team. But it was interesting getting a look at Gyökeres because obviously, you know, everyone's talking about are Arsenal going to go for a centre-forward next year at some point. He's one of the names who's going to come up because he scored so many goals. But I don't think it was his best night, and I think that's down to the two centre-halves.
Do you know, it's not so much even just the two centre-halves who dealt with him really well. The midfield deserve a lot of credit as well because for Victor Gyökeres and his service, he likes the midfield player to get on the half-turn and slip balls in. Because Thomas Partey and Declan Rice were just there, they didn't allow them to get into those type of areas. They were so tight and compact, they wouldn't allow them to get into that area to feed it through. And the only opportunity, as you said there, that they spoke about was when Jakub Kiwior came on and he managed to get a shot which hits the post. But I thought they handled him really well. It's quite, when you're watching the game and then you're just watching Gyökeres, but the game's going on, every single time, a couple of times he went to make a run, Gabriel would just give him a little bump. A little bit naughty, but it's not a foul, but it's one of those where, as a forward and being in that position before, there's nothing more annoying than you're trying to focus on the game and time he runs, and as you turn, he's just there with his shoulder in your face, and Saliba's giving him a little bump as well. It's nasty, but it's quite effective, because after a while, he started to go a little bit wider. He didn't really want that physical alteration in the middle of the pitch as well, so I thought they handled him really, really well. He's still a very good centre-forward. Would I go and pay 80 million for him after that performance last night? Probably not.
Interesting. And obviously, speaking of Gabriel, what did we think of him nicking his celebration?
Well, I loved it.
Apparently, Sporting did it to us, basically, last time we played them. So they imitated Granit Xhaka's celebration, which was something like that, or like his thumb up or something. So it was a bit of getting a payback, apparently. And Gabriel, he's one of those players who does remember things. You know, if you think about his duels with Haaland and how they've carried on into the next games, if there's a bit of needle there, he never forgets, I think.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was a good bit of fun. I think it added to the sort of situation, and I think Gyökeres sort of quit back after the match, didn't he? But I think that's Gabriel's personality. You know, he's quite confrontational. And yeah, I don't know, Darren, how would you feel if a defender nicked your celebration?
Well, it's one of those things because it happens. The only thing, if you're Gyökeres, you're annoyed, is that it's different. Like when it happened in the Premier League with Ivan Toney, you know you're going to see him again. So you're like, do you know what I mean? So I'll remember that. But with the Champions League situation, because they might not see Sporting again, Gyökeres is probably thinking, how do I even get them back? I can't because I might not see him again, but I don't mind all that. And I've said it on both counts, Gabriel doing that, at some point, it swings in circles. So it's going to happen to him at some point, and as long as you can take that, then I'm all fine with it.
What was your celebration? Can we see it now?
I didn't really have one. I just ran off with a little wave. Or
was it just like, was that like royal wave or something?
I don't know what it was. It was just like the anticipation. I never had a Gyökeres with his smart stuff, but yeah, it was just the excitement. We used to get carried away, and however I felt at the time was...
So what would you do now then? What would you do now?
Probably just the knee slide. That seems to be the traditional one, doesn't it? The knee slide. I know it's boring, but everyone does it.
Yeah, it is.
Risky, though.
Yeah, I always think that when they go for the knee slide, I'm like, anything can happen because I've seen some tumbles.
I think Patrick Vieira did it years ago, didn't he? During a knee slide, he twisted his knee or something. So yeah, I've got traumatic memories.
So avoiding the knee slide. So James, you mentioned that Arsenal will probably be interested in a centre forward next summer. So who would your personal choice be?
Oh man, that's a hell of a question.
It's a big pool, I know.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I mean, I might contest that. Is there a big pool? Like of the very, very, very top? I'm not so sure. I mean, obviously, like everyone talks about Haaland and Gyokeres. These are kind of the names that we're hearing. Isak maybe is another name that's in the mix. But I think that group of players who you'd say would come in, start above Kai Havertz, make an immediate impact is actually really small. In a dream world, I think Isak ticks every box. I really do. I think he's mobile, he's athletic, he's improved as a finisher, I think. He's becoming more clinical. I think he can combine, he can play off the flank if you need him to. He's Premier League ready, Premier League proven.
He seems more durable now as well than he was before.
Yeah, definitely. Like that would be one of the questions, injuries. He's got a history of injuries, but he seems to be doing better on that front. The big issue is, I think, price with him. You know, coming from a Premier League club, a club like Newcastle, who aren't necessarily under huge pressure to sell him. We'll see. I mean, there might be a bit of a contract situation there that Arsenal might be able to leverage. But that would be my pick. I don't know how realistic it is, but that'd be my choice.
Yeah, I'd go with that. Isak for me is the one. And it might not, between the two clubs, it might not be the case because Newcastle, of course, ain't going to want to sell him. But it might come down to the player. Because if Newcastle was to finish 9th or 10th this season, Arsenal in the Champions League again next year, he might have a decision to make because it's quite short careers. And yes, he's had a great time at Newcastle, but a player of his quality, international, should be playing in the Champions League every season. He's got the ability, he's got the quality. But again, as James was saying there, it's probably going to be the price, 80 to 100 million. And why would you take anything less than that? Because he is one of their prized assets. I think if you had to lose one of their star players, I think he would probably be the last one you'd want to lose. I think you'd probably lose Bruno Gyökeres before him, Tonali, Botman, who's had obviously the big injury. It was always those four. I think if you're going to lose one, I think Isak would be probably the last one you'd want to lose.
I think with Isak as well is that he knows Martin Odegaard as well. He played with him at Real Sociedad. Yeah. And the key thing, I think, with the striker when you get them is if you look at someone like Sesko, you know, he is a number 9, that's where he plays. And if you're pitching to him and saying, look, you're going to come here and play, well, he's going to look at Kai Havertz and think, now how often I'm going to play? Whereas if it's Isak, you know, you can play out wide, you know, Havertz can drop in. I think having someone who is versatile in that position, I think will make an easier fit into that squad than if you buy an out-and-out number 9 who basically thinks either I'm playing there or I'm not getting in this team. I think that might be an easier pitch with a more versatile player.
So then back to last night's game. Despite the scoreline, Raya made a great number of saves, didn't he?
Did really well. I mean, he's had a fantastic start to the season, I have to say. It's funny because his clean sheets are down, right? He was Golden Glove winner last year, and I think it's going to be tricky for him to do that this year based on the start Arsenal have made. But he's played really well. It's been every aspect of his game. There were a couple of good saves last night. One down low to his near post. I think he did well to get a hand on the Gyokeres effort as well. But it's his general presence and command of his penalty area. You know, when a corner kick comes into that area, you just fancy him every time to come and take it. And I think if you're a centre-half or a defensive player for Arsenal, the security of knowing you've got a goalkeeper who's prepared to come off his line, take the ball cleanly, buy you some time, must be massive. So, you know, I actually think so far he's been fantastic. And if you were calling player of the season right now for Arsenal, he'd have to be part of that conversation.
Yeah, I like him from set plays as well. I think when you've got a goalkeeper that commands and knows exactly when he's going to come, and the defenders know that rapport is massive. I mean, there's certain teams who Arsenal played against with their goalkeeper, good goalkeepers, but you don't know whether they come in or go in. With David Raya, the moment the ball goes to a certain height, you just think, here he comes. I know the goal that we conceded from a set play last night, it's not really his fault. Like, it's really a poor corner, and then it's like a deflected volley and it ends up going in. But I think his general kind of command in his own box and the rapport with the two centre-backs when he comes for crosses, I think he's been brilliant.
So then our position in the Champions League table, well, looks pretty healthy, especially with the fixtures remaining. And just a note on that table, it can change so drastically. I was looking at it last night during the City game when they were 3-2 and they were maybe 4 or 5. And then at the end of the game, they went down to 15th. I mean, anything can happen. But it's looking all right for our fixtures, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's good. And you talk about the differences. You know, Sporting went into that second in the table. Yeah. And I think the difficult thing is no one really knows how many points you need to get that top 8 spot. You know, Champions League before in the group stage, you're like 10 points, that'll get you through to the knockouts. I think no one really knows now where they stand, which I think when you get to that Girona game, that last game, the table could swing massively. So for Arsenal, these 2 games coming up, you know, Monaco, Zagreb, if they can get 2 big wins there, I think they'll be really strong going into that situation. There's some big teams that are, you know, dropping down the bottom of that table. So it could be, I think it could be an exciting finish because right now it's kind of been a bit of a weird sort of phase with the competition.
I think they'll really want to be in that top 8, though. I think Mikel Arteta will really want that. Not just because of sort of the prestige and the message it sends and what it says about Arsenal as a club, but I just think missing that 2-legged tie. He's spoken so much recently about, you know, the luxury, the importance of having players fit again. If he can avoid a couple of games in what is already a very busy fixture list, especially with us kind of still going in the Carabao, the FA Cup still to come, I think he'd be really keen to do that.
Do you know what? It's important as well that Arsenal do win their games, and the last few games are quite comfortable. Because I do think when they made this format, a lot of people were thinking maybe towards the end of this group phase, you might see a lot of dead rubbers, but it doesn't look that way because all of a sudden now, say Madrid, I think they're I don't know if they're on 6 points, I think they are. If they get beat by Liverpool, then all of a sudden they're still on 6 points. At some point, they're going to have to put a run together and win all their games. So I think for Arsenal, if they can win the next 2 and then be comfortably in that top 8 and then maybe the last game just kind of maybe rest a few, bring a couple of fringe players in, then you haven't got to kind of avoid that circus that's going to be at the end of the group phase.